usability, user-friendliness, but it's specifically relating to people that have different abilities and disabilities. All right, so when we talk about accessibility, that's typically what we're talking about. Now, we went over some sort of just general ideas, and today we're going to get a little more specific. The general guidelines, if I can summarize what I've said up to this point, I've said, if I can give this, boil it down to 5 minutes. Number one, I said that there is assistive technology that helps people to accomplish being able to use a computer effectively, despite disabilities. That's idea number one. Number two is that assistive technology isn't enough on its own. Design needs to be in place to allow someone to take advantage of it. And the analogy I gave in real life is, you know, a wheelchair is an example of assistive technology, but if there's no wheelchair ramps, then that defeats the assistive technology. If there's no elevators on campus and so on. So design has to go along with the assistive technology and work together. What we're going to find, the two key points, or two of the key points we have when we talk about developing web pages that are accessible is, number one, multiple presentation. Run out of space here. And number two, simplicity. Now that might seem like it contradicts each other, right? By multiple presentation, I mean taking the same material and representing it two different ways on your web page or on your website. Good example of that would be a web page that has an audio file on it. A second way to represent that might be with a text transcript of that audio file. So that's multiple presentation. Now you might say, well, does that defeat the purpose of simplicity? Wouldn't simplicity say, well, we'll just have it one way? That would be simpler than having it two ways. And these two things have to be balanced, the multiple presentation and simplicity. There's a good statement by someone, maybe Einstein. We'll give Einstein credit, right? He was smart. Even if he didn't say this, he might have said it, right? He might have said it sometime. Something to the effect that things should be as simple as they can be, but no simpler. All right? So, and that makes sense, right? You know, if you're explaining something that's complicated, of course your explanation is going to be a little bit complicated. You know, you can't take complicated subjects and make them real simple. Go ahead.
Well, something like, if you can't explain it simply, you don't really know how.
Oh, I'm not sure about that. That's not the quote I'm thinking of. That might be a different quote, but that's not the one I have in mind here. Let's see if I can find it. Right. But that's definitely a different thought than the thought I'm trying to get. Here we go. Albert Einstein. Everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler. All right. So I think that allows us to say, well, we're going to have multiple presentations and we're going to keep things simple. So it's okay to do things what you might think is redundantly. That is, having an audio file and having a text file, because there's a certain number of people that can't understand one of them. They can't understand the audio file because they're deaf. All right, so by providing a second alternative, you're not making it really more complicated. You are simply presenting the same information a couple different ways so that everyone can access it. All right? So these two things, multiple presentation and simplicity, are going to be the two things we're going to keep in mind as we talk about what we can do to design websites that are accessible. So let's talk about what different disabilities will influence someone's ability to access the web. That's the first thing that we're going to do. And then secondly, we're going to talk about what we can do to help someone that has these issues. The first one is people that have issues with their vision. That's the one that people can probably most easily identify with because the web is so visual. The web is a visual medium by and large. But that doesn't mean that people that don't have the ability to see can't access it, as we talked about last time with screen readers. All right? And again, it seems difficult to us to imagine what it would be like to try to access the web only using a screen reader. But if that's what you had to do, you would work out a way that it would work for you, right? You would use it in a way that it would work for you. Now, there's a lot of things we can do, for example, placing all attributes on images to help people see and get the content that they wouldn't get from because they're not able to see. All right? Now, here's another characteristic that's true for accessibility. When we talk about categories of disabilities that are relevant, there's sort of the most extreme cases of them, but there's also less extreme cases of them. So for example, as far as vision goes, at the one extreme, there's people that are blind, right? That is probably the most extreme vision issue that you can have. You simply can't see, all right? However, there are milder or less severe vision issues that can affect someone's ability to access the web. What would be an example of a less severe disability? Yes? Colorblindness. Absolutely. A colorblind person can still see. They just have a difficulty distinguishing colors from each other. All right? Now, they're not seeing in black and white. All right? Some people think colorblindness means that you see in black and white. That's not the case. At least it's not always the case. But you can have trouble distinguishing between different colors. All right? And that can affect your ability. If, for example, you say click the red button, what if the person can't distinguish what the red button is? Right? That is, that can be an issue. Let's go and look at, because there are pages that provide colorblind filters that will show you what it's like for someone who's colorblind. So let's go. And let's Google colorblind filter. If I can type. All right, this shows us an image, all right, of some crayons or pencils or chalk or something. And that is how a person with normal vision can see it. Now, if you notice, there are a whole bunch of different possible colorblind issues. This is red weak protonomaly. That's what someone who has that form of color blindness would see. You notice the reds are way less vivid. Green weak, blue weak. Red blind, green blind, blue blind, this is sort of the full-blown color blindness where everything's grayscale, and blue cone. So there's a whole range of different things. What can you do for someone that's colorblind to help them access the content on the page? Yes? One thing you could do is you could provide multiple CSS files. Absolutely. That way a person could pick what color scheme was most effective for them. That would be a great way. That's actually sort of a third principle, now that you mention it. In addition to these things, and I guess that relates to multiple presentation, but being able to user customize sort of is a nice form of multiple presentation. So you have the same content that you can display with different style sheets. Being aware of color blindness and using color schemes that have high contrast is another technique that you can use. Another technique is not use color as the only way to indicate something. What do I mean by that? Let's say you have an important warning on your home page. All right? You might think, well, we'll put the warning in red to make it stand out. All right? Well, if someone can't see red, it doesn't stand out then. But if you apply two ways of making it stand out, if you make it red and bold, red and a larger font, red and italics, red with a border around it, if you use multiple ways to designate that little bit of special meaning, all right, then people that can see color will look at it and say, oh, that red italics text is a warning. Whereas people that can't see color will say, oh, that text is in italics, there must be something special about it, and we'll tell that it's a warning. So you could use a variety and you can combine techniques together. But if you just use color, then it's going to be very confusing for people that are have color blindness. There's actually another website that we can go to that will actually filter a web page. Again, here is, you can put in any web page you want to, and then you can view with the different kinds of color blindness how the page is going to look. Let's say we go to Google. All right. So if you look at that, what someone without color blindness with someone with color blindness, well, these buttons look a little different, but I mean, it's still going to be usable. It's not going to look exactly like it, but it's still going to be usable. There's one, the blue button kind of looks grayish in that. You know, we can test. All right, well, let's try that. Here's LC's web page, and if we look, with Google Coca-Cola, well, that's chugging in the background. This actually takes a little while sometimes because it has to grab the image and apply a filter to it. All right, there it's monochromatic. And you notice, again, the thing to keep in mind is there's nothing you can do to help people that are colorblind see color, right? But you have to make sure it's functional. Like this doesn't look the same, but you can read everything. All right, let's try Coca-Cola. All right, with that, it's going to look like that. For this, kind of weird looking. All right. Of course, if you had that condition, that probably would not seem unusual to you. You know, you'd get used to it. But the point is it's still readable. All right, it's still readable, and you can use it. Let's try Barbie. So using good color schemes and allowing customization and using other techniques other than just color to indicate something is to stand out. Like you might put a different background on your navigation, different background color. You might then go and put a border around it. That's two ways that stands out. All right. What's another form of vision that isn't total blindness and isn't color blindness? Yes. Yeah, just bad eyesight. All right. You know, and there's a number of reasons for that. You know, someone could have glaucoma, or someone could have any number of different conditions. I don't have very good eyesight, and I have kind of a condition that happens to older people. What was it? Posterior viscous detachment. It's sort of like giant floaters, all right? And so I don't have the best eyesight. What's something that you could do for people with that issue? Well, there's the assistive technology of the magnifying glass. What else can we do as web designers, though? Yeah. Make it so that the page looks okay even if you enlarge the font. So if we can go to a page and we zoom in, well, let's go to a page that has more text on it. Let's go to Wall Street Journal. I didn't want to go to the store. They tricked me into clicking their ad. All right. Right. My head wasn't working today. All right. So notice that this page is responsive in that as I make the text bigger or smaller, it doesn't break. It's taking a minute to display it, so it's going kind of crazy because I've been making it bigger and smaller. Yeah, exactly. All right. Making sure things aren't too close together, right? Like links, so making sure there's adequate space between the links. All right, is another thing that you can do. All right. What about for people that are totally blind? What are things that you can do? Well, we talked about one way at the beginning of the class. We talked about having alt attributes on images to give a text description. There's actually a full description that you can give of an image which actually links to another page. I've seen art websites have that, whereas you could click on it and go and see a full description of the image and not just a short text description. One thing that you can do with the screen reader that's effective for screen readers is to have a skip navigation link. All right. U.S. Department of Treasury. Let's see what those people are up to today. All right. We have the text and all that. And as we navigate around, we notice that the pages, all the pages are structured the same way. Let's look up money laundering. Okay, let's look up. Yeah, that's what I'm about to discuss. Now, notice something. This stays the same. This navigation stays the same, right? Someone that can see sort of tunes that out. They know it's there if they need it, but they don't read it every time you go to the page. So if I were to click on news and click on this, I'm not going to go U.S. Department of Treasury, About Treasury, Secretary Mnuchin, Policy Issues, Data. I'm going to just jump right in with this article and start reading it because that's what I'm interested in. You know that that navigation's there, but there's really no need to read it. Well, when someone accesses a page via screen reader, it's going to read this navigation every single time, all right, which is going to be a drag, right, because they're just like you. They don't want to spend their time reading the same redundant navigation every page they go to. So what you can provide is a link to, and it's funny, I saw it a couple pages ago. Where were we at? Here? There's a link to, oh, right here. Skip navigation. There we go. Let's go to the link right here, skip navigation. That puts you right here in the main part of the page. So you don't have to sit through and listen to the narrator read all the links, which would take who knows how long to get through. All right? Yeah, go ahead. Well, it's invisible because typically it doesn't really give a lot of benefit for people that are sighted, right? Because people that are sighted just sort of automatically do that out of reflex, right? They just like, okay, I'm just going to jump down there. It's for people that the screen reader is narrating it that it's really a benefit for. And they make it visible when you hover it, I think, just so that people won't wonder like, gee, I wonder what that link is, right? So they make it visible in that case. So the skip navigation link is another thing. Now, we're going to talk about tables and forms coming up in the next few weeks. So we'll talk about some accessibility issues for those things. Because again, your eyes don't just read and take in information. Your eyes see a structure. And if the page is being read to you, you don't get a sense of that structure unless you put in some code to make that happen. Okay? Now, another disability besides vision related. Vision, color blindness, and poor eyesight. We talked about those. What's another disability that's relevant in accessing the web? Motor skills. Keeping in mind, simplicity, and giving options. Multiple presentation, I guess, is options. What are things that we can do for people with motor skills to help make the site more accessible? When I say motor skills, you know what I mean, right? In other words, they might have they might have certain conditions that make moving a mouse difficult, typing on a keyboard difficult. They might not necessarily be paralyzed, but their motion is limited. Absolutely. A good, clear navigation screen where they don't have to go through a million pages to get to where they're going would definitely help them, because, you know, if someone's having a hard time clicking on links, clicking on 3 links is easier than clicking on 300 links, right? It absolutely goes into simplicity. Now, who else does having a clear navigation scheme benefit? Everybody else on the face of the earth, right? No one says, I can access this information better when the navigation is confusing, right? That's an important thing to keep in mind, that some of the principles for accessibility are simply different reasons for just designing your page well. It's just another form of good design, right? So you're not designing your pages for people with disabilities, you're designing your pages for everyone. That's where the notion of universal design comes in. Because some of the things that we talked about, you know, having an adequate space between the links would be one thing. Well, someone that has motor control problems, that would benefit them, right? Because they don't have to get their mouse exactly on a tiny point on the screen. But someone who's accessing the website on a phone has the same issue. Someone who has poor eyesight has that same issue. So by solving the problem for one set of people, you solve it for everyone. All right? What's another way that you can make the website accessible, more accessible for people that have issues with motor skills? We talked about good navigation. Again, a lot of space between links. What's another one? Well, the virtual keyboard definitely helps. That's a piece of assistive technology. That's not something that you, as a web designer, do. But related to that would be to use keyboard shortcuts, right? If I can press a key and go to a page, for some people, how to add keyboard shortcuts. All right. This is done typically with JavaScript. And let's view the demo. Here's a page. I think they said question mark did something. Hit question mark, it shows me a list of the keyboard shortcuts. Add J, or J or K will highlight the post. So if I'm reading this and I'm going around, I didn't want to do that. Control J, I didn't want to do that. Oh, just pressing J, you're absolutely right. Yeah, J moves me through these. And K brings you up. What was the other one? Slash did a search. And so on. For certain people with certain kinds of motor control issues, such as, you know, any sort of neurological issue or whatever, that can be very beneficial. It can also be very beneficial to someone who uses a computer all the time and gets repetitive motion injury, carpal tunnel being an example of that. And so that's something that can help, adding the keyboard shortcuts. Again, options. All right? So we make our site simple. We have a clear navigation scheme. We make sure there's plenty of space around the links and all that. That's making it simple. Multiple options, we add keyboard shortcuts to things. All right? What's another example of a disability that would affect someone accessing the web? Right, hearing. And again, there's the extreme case of this where you're talking about someone who is totally deaf, but there's also less extreme cases, someone that just doesn't hear very well. All right? How do we help someone that is deaf or doesn't hear well? Okay, a transcript is one way. What else can we do on videos? Maybe something visual to go along with it. Yeah. If you have a video, you could either have a transcript or you could have captions where the person can read it. All right? Again, these multiple presentations don't really violate simplicity because they're adding value. All right? They're making it, they're following the guideline of making it as simple as it can be, but no simpler, right? Because if you eliminate the captions, that's too simple, because then people that can't hear can't access the material. All right? YouTube has built into it a captioning, which is not always very good. Let's find a YouTube video. The auto-generated captioning, yeah. Right. That was exactly going to be my point. All right. Oh.
And new neck and chest age defense with SPS.
Hotly anticipated. Now, of course, they use the word pro with these. These are the AirPods Pro. It certainly is more pro than the other version. Nonetheless, here they are. They're sitting in front of us. They come with a pro price tag. This is $249, $250. You skip the $1, makes it look like less. What are the differences? Well, obviously, with the Pro name, you're expecting to have improved sound quality here. By nature of the design, that should be a given. You have interchangeable ear tips, so maybe the one that's pre-installed is not perfect for you. You swap it out.
Usually
in
they're all
fact,
messed up.
apparently, right within the pairing process through Apple's proprietary chip and software,
I
even
almost
fit
wonder if this is
component to the
not
setup
auto-generated.
process. Of course,
and he supplied
active
his
noise
own
canceling in
captions.
here. You get none of that action with the regular AirPods. And you have the transparency mode, which lets you use the external microphones typically used
People can
for
benefit
noise
from this
canceling
even if they're
to
not
hear
deaf.
your
All right? If they have a hard time hearing. If they're in a noisy place. If they don't have speakers with them or don't have headphones with them. English isn't their first language. Exactly. Any number of reasons that people can benefit from that. All right? A lot of times I watch Netflix with the captions on, just because it's hard for me to hear sometimes, you know, and it's like, what did they say? It's like, yeah, it's up on the screen. I can just read it.
Yeah, some shows, they so softly quickly that it's hard to...
I found some shows there's such a wide dynamic range, too. In other words, it'll be really, really quiet and then really, really loud. So if you set it, if you turn up your volume, when the explosions start, it's deafening. Yet if you turn down your volume, what went that whispering? You know, you can't hear a word they're saying either. So the captions help for there too. And again, an important fact of designing for accessibility is you're not designing strictly for accessibility, although that is a worthwhile goal. You're designing for everyone, all right? Because everyone, first of all, could have milder versions of these disabilities, or could be in some kind of circumstance where they may not have that disability, but they have some sort of other limitation, like the room that they're in and being too loud or whatever. All right? It all comes down to showing the same content a bunch of different ways. Now, let me rephrase that. Not a bunch of different ways, but multiple ways. For example, if you had captions, maybe you don't need a transcript, right? Maybe you decide, well, I have captions on the video. That'll handle anyone that can't hear the video. You don't necessarily need to do captions and a transcript. That's really the art of design, is figuring out what will work for most people without overcomplicating things. All right? What is another disability that can be relevant besides motor skills, hearing, vision? There's a whole category of these. And again, I'm not a psychologist, so forgive me if I say something not correct. Yeah, go ahead. Absolutely. That's what I was just going to get to. All right. Skills that are related to, they would be called cognitive disabilities, things related to difficulty understanding material. It could be a lot of things. It could be ADHD, right? It could be dyslexia, or it could be other issues. All right? Simplicity there obviously helps, right? If you're talking about ADHD, why, don't have a lot of extra stuff on your screen. Don't have a lot of animation going off on the sidelines that really don't add any value to the screen. All right? Keep it simple so that people can focus. Now, again, that's true for someone with ADHD, but it's also true for people that don't have ADHD. They don't want to be distracted either. It's more severe in the case of ADHD, but people that don't have ADHD, they don't want a lot of extra stuff on the web pages either. They just want the relevant information. What about dyslexia? First of all, what is dyslexia? Dyslexia, a lot of people misunderstand as being simply reversing the letters of the words. It's not just that. That's an aspect of it, but it's not just that, and it's not like they do it all the time, people with dyslexia. Dyslexia involves just the confusion of letters in a variety of different forms. There actually is a Dyslexia Simulator that gives you a sense of what it's like. All right, let's take a minute and let's read it to ourselves. All right, and let's see if we can follow it. Oh, that's not the link. Here we go. Okay, so this is some of the ways that dyslexia can be experienced. Reversing letters, D and B, word reversals, inversions, M and W confusion, transpositions, confused small words, All right, try reading this. You have a minute. Okay. All right, here you have to answer these questions. Why are images good for web accessibility? Okay, visual aid. Who would be negatively impacted by a text-only site? People with reading disabilities, right? Here's the unmodified paragraph. Would a text-only website be ideal with someone with a reading disorder? Hardly. They actually increase comprehension, and so on. So, how many of you understood what the simulated dyslexia paragraph said? Did you understand it? More or less. Yeah, some of the words you just, and I experienced the same thing, right? Some of the words you just I have no idea what they are, but you kind of get the gist of it. I think that's a good simulation of that because, again, it's not that people who are dyslexic can't read, all right? It's not that people that are dyslexic have trouble with understanding or comprehending, is that they physically can't distinguish some of the letters and words. All right? And it puts them at a handicap. All right? So what are some of the things based on that and just your own reasoning do you think that we can do to help people that are dyslexic? All right, images and alt text, absolutely. Images put things in context. If you're having trouble distinguishing what words are, if you see an image that corresponds to that, that might help you distinguish, oh, that's what that word means, not this, all right, in case the letters of that word are jumbled for you. All right, that helps you give you a context so that you can decide. What else might be good? Not necessarily mentioned in the article, but just applying your own reasoning. Okay, how so? Okay. Anyone else? Do you think certain fonts are easier for people with dyslexia to read? Yeah, I'm sure there are. All right. I would think any over-elaborate decorative font is probably harder for people. Let's Google it. Good fonts for dyslexia. %10 of people have dyslexia. Thank you. Good fonts are Helvetica. Helvetica is good for everything, right? Courier, Arial, Verdana, Computer, Modern Unicode. Arial italics decreases. Sans serif, Roman, and monospace fonts type increasing performance, while italic fonts did the opposite. So it's almost saying avoid italics, you know. So maybe what I said a few minutes ago about for colorblind people put things in italics is wrong. Make it bold instead, or put a border around it, or some other way. Okay? Again, the thing to remember is that, you know, people with dyslexia sometimes have trouble in school, but it's not because they're not smart or don't understand. They gave a couple of examples here, Stephen Jobs and Steven Spielberg, two people by anyone's standard that would be considered brilliant, had this condition. So it's not that there's a problem with the mind, there's a problem distinguishing the letters. All right, and I'm sure we could do, I would not trust just one research study, you know, but rather look and see what they say. Comic Sans actually was distinguished to be good, amazingly enough. Now, of course, we can, if we can make it customizable, all the better, because one font may help a particular person more than others. So just like with color blindness, if you can customize the CSS, you can pick something that works for you. One last thing that I didn't mention is epilepsy. That's also a neurological condition. What is the particular disability that or accessibility issue that relates to epilepsy? Seizures, especially animations that flash at a certain rate. So does that mean that you never have an animation on your page? No. That means if you have an animation on your page, provide an alternative. Tell the person that this page contains animations and give them an alternative. If I was teaching a class in biology, for example, maybe I would want to do an animation of cell mitosis or something, all right? But I would provide alternatives for someone for whom the animation might be troublesome. Now, when you add all these conditions together, when you consider that people can have milder versions of these issues, all right, or circumstances, and when you consider that as you age, you start to get a little bit of each of these, right? Maybe not dyslexia, but your hearing is less fine. Your motor skills are less fine. Your vision is less fine. All right? Accessibility is a huge issue and affects a lot of people, and therefore it should be considered. The beauty of it is, though, designing for accessibility doesn't mean that you're going to make a site that's boring or doesn't work for people that don't have these disabilities. All right? Because again, the notion of universal design. Simple websites are good for everyone. Alternatives are good for everyone. So keep that in mind as you're designing. Design for people with disabilities, but know that much of what you do is also going to benefit people that don't have disabilities. And if it doesn't benefit them, at least it doesn't get in their way. That skip navigation link, we didn't even notice it for the first few times we were on that page, right? So it didn't really benefit us, but it didn't get in our way and keep us from doing anything. All right, I believe your design is due this week. All right, so that should be high on your priority list. Share your design with other people in the class. Share it with me before you turn it in. All right, remember in lab to bring it to my attention if you've turned something in and it isn't graded. We'll see you up there.